Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining and excited to be talking about AI freelancing and my journey and learnings from it in the last 1.5 years, almost 2 years, I would say. I'll share all my thoughts and feel free to ask your questions and happy to answer all of them to the best of my knowledge. Without further delay, let's get started. Awesome. So first, a 30-second introduction about me for those who are joining in for the first time. I'm Ramsri, currently based out of Hyderabad, India. I'm a lead data scientist with 8 to 9 years of work experience. And I did my master's in US, then stayed in US for almost 8 years, then Singapore almost 1.5 years, then currently I'm based out of India. And about me, I switched gears after working at a startup and large company for 6 to 8 years. Then I ventured into entrepreneurship. And based out of Singapore, we had a pre-seed funded startup. Currently, I'm building question.ai, generate advanced quiz questions from text in seconds. And also, I'm building supermeme.ai. You can generate original memes using AI. You can check both of these. And if you just want to check my socials and get connected there, it could be Twitter or LinkedIn or YouTube channel. All those are available on ramsri.ai. So feel free to go there and connect on the social links available. Awesome. So Prabhu asks, when will the session start? So right now we are starting the actual session. Cool. So the agenda today, let's go through these points, which is, first of all, understand, is freelancing right for you? And second thing is how to get started in freelancing, and how do you filter the right clients and understand whether someone is a good client to work with or not. And then charging as well as raising the prices and leveraging social channels for higher growth. It could be in terms of your prices that you charge or building a personal brand, all these things. And taking payments, what are the options available and what are the usual terms, etc. And the other thing is, how do you build high leverage, which is productizing services, and also any pro tips that I from my experience have learned. Great. So I think you can all see the screen, right? Agenda screen and everything. Can someone type in the chat? Okay, awesome. Thanks, Kalyan. And so first things first. So this talk is going to be raw in the sense that I won't be a flag bearer to say that you should do freelancing, or I won't be a flag bearer that you should not do freelancing. It's almost like an unfiltered talk from me about pros and cons of freelancing. And from my experience, so first, let's get the biggest thing out of the bag, which is who shouldn't do it. So financially speaking, if you have loans to pay, or if you are the only sole breadwinner of the family, there's kids' education, or you have retired parents where there is quite a lot of financial burden on your shoulders, I don't usually recommend freelancing or consulting for them. And the second thing is a little bit psychological, because freelancing in itself has instability and in terms of financial gain, there's nothing like that's constant. And second thing is that if you're really afraid of, if there's a lot of peer pressure about someone buying a house and doing other things, getting promotions, raise, things like that, I think it can take a serious toll on mental health as well. If you are full-time freelancer and you have all these things surrounding you. So word of caution is that make sure that you're rightly aligned on these things. And that's one thing that I'll always say to people. If you're heavily burdened with things that you need to take care of, it could be financial loans or other things, I don't usually recommend. Now that we got that out of the bag, let's get to the pros of freelancing, which is who should embrace freelancing. So I think the first thing that I'll mention about freelancing is freedom. So if you can trade off stable income for a higher freedom, then I think freelancing is perfect for you, because you can take your time off, do things at your own pace. I mean, upskilling and other things, or if you want to work on your health and other things, you can always take breaks without any permission. So I think freedom is the ultimate thing. And the biggest power of freelancing is working on other tasks without compromising on your core. What do I mean by that? Basically, you can grow your YouTube channel, launch another product. Usually, you do not have conflict of interest. In rare cases, you do, but unless you are a full-time freelancer for somebody, oftentimes the clauses are not as rigid as working in a full-time job. That every talk that you need to do, every YouTube video that you put out, all those things are not monitored. If you are a freelancer, it's almost like a trade of you get some work done and get paid in reverse, things like that. So you get a lot of freedom to grow your passive income. It could be courses, or you want to launch products. It could be mini startups or micro SaaS or all these things. And the second thing is diversity of projects, because typically if you're working full time, there's a fixed project, or you work with a fixed company in a fixed domain. It could be fintech, edtech, any of these things, and you work usually on one project. Of course, that project could end or switch gears, and you could join different project in 6 months from now, etc. But overall, even if you're working at a startup, usually you take lead of something, and then you have you work it typically in a domain. But what happens with freelancing is 1 month you could be working on medtech, one month on edtech, ad tech, any of these. So anything from medical to financial to education, you could work on multiple projects all at the same time. And so if you really enjoy context switching and all these things, I think it's very, very useful. And the other thing is actually creator economy. Like I mentioned, if you want to pursue side hustles, grow your YouTube channel, or launch digital products, by that I mean courses or ebooks, or if you want to do consulting on the side, that means you just consult people hourly to get advice, things like that. You can do all these things in freelancing. Usually the restrictions and the clauses are minimal when compared to full-time job. That's one. And now the biggest thing that people ask all the time is, how do I get started in freelancing? And let me tell you this thing, that a good number of freelancers out there, it's not that they wanted to be freelancers. Freelancing found them and they loved it, and they continued their journey in it. So in all honesty, there is a little bit of luck coupled with opportunity when it comes to your first job or first freelancing gig and everything. So I won't discount that there is that factor. Now, given that you are very hell-bent on becoming a freelancer, I am talking in terms of AI freelancing, how do you go about it? So I always say, do not try to do everything for everybody. That means you cannot really be like an AI freelancer who can do anything from reinforcement learning to natural language processing to core computer vision. Usually that's not possible, and people also do not identify if you do multiple things. So always try to pick a subcategory within AI. That means it could just be a focus on natural language processing, or a focus on computer vision, or a focus on even building search systems. So, or classification algorithms, things like that. So always pick a subtopic that is broad enough. That means there are audience to it. Pick that as the main core and learn all adjacencies accordingly. And the other thing that you need to do is pick a topic that is in the upside of the trend, as well as that matches with your interest. So it's important to do that, because there's no point in learning skills that are not very relevant, right? Especially if you're a freelancer, you need to really tap into skills that are in high demand. So you cannot at all be outdated. So pick skills that are in high demand, as well as that intersect with your personality as well as interests. That's one main thing. So I talked about picking a niche in terms of technology, and the other niche is actually picking domains. It could be ed tech, fintech, healthcare, ad tech, advertising, or anything. What I'm trying to say is that usually domain also has quite a lot of nuances associated with it. It could be, you know building something is not just about understanding technology. You need to understand the business side of it to deliver problems that really matter to product managers or CEOs. So in order to do that, you need to also build in some uh, knowledge in a particular domain. So I always tell, instead of going too broad AI in general, always pick a focus area, and also pick focus areas in the domains as well. Um, awesome. So the other thing is, the main thing is, once you are past that, uh, once you're past the point that you pick some domain in either of these things and mix and match, now what I want you to do is, um, go and build your presence on the internet, because the main thing is that nowadays it's an internet driven economy. I would say the creator economy is booming as well. So the biggest thing is to leverage internet as well as socials. So first have a website for you, get a website, and then also a blog, I would say, usually. And your personal website should showcase your skills, as well as collect social proof from your previous testimonials, or clients that you worked with, etc. And also kind of show your vibe about who you are as a person and all these things. So do not kind of try to keep it extremely technical, rather keep it a blend of technical as well as showcase your interest and other things. And the other thing is to register on popular websites for freelancing. It could be Upwork, TopTal, freelancer.com, etc. So build your presence on the internet. And the second thing is actually building a brand. So like I mentioned, first of all, when you're starting freelancing, you want to be known for something. So if you follow on LinkedIn and Twitter, etc., right? So people give name for themselves. Sometimes if someone is in no code, they say no code guy, or building something in that space. They kind of give a name for themselves. For example, Susan gave like the classification guru. So from the profile and everything, you do understand it completely, what it is for. So what someone is doing and what they are good at. So essentially, narrow down, pick a niche, and be known for something in the initial days at least. And the other thing I would say, the biggest source of inbound leads is through blog posts, and on LinkedIn and Twitter, the regular posts. So I personally use Medium. You could also use your personal website to do blog posts. But the biggest thing is that blogs are very solid source of establishing your knowledge in something and command in something, and driving inbound leads. And it happened quite a lot of times that people come to my LinkedIn or I get inbound leads through my blogs usually. And I also focus on few areas like edtech, things like that. So people come in through those channels as well who are in that area. And the other thing is, if you're okay with voice and video, then I think YouTube channels and talks are very good sources as well to build your presence, and use as many channels for distribution, but at the same time, do not focus on more than 2 or 3. That's what I would say. And so most people ask this, how do I get my first freelancing gig? I think to get the initial and the first crucial freelancing gigs, I would say you have to do some work upfront. What do I mean by that? I think here's a strategy that worked best for me, which is whenever you are very new on particular website, it could be Upwork or Freelancer or any of these. What happens is that you do not have any reputation at all for people to take a bet on you or believe on you. So what you need to do is you need to actually do some upfront work, which is sometimes when you see AI freelancing jobs, they even give a small CSV file and give some data set, or they give a broad problem statement and they ask you for how would you approach it, etc. So my strategy always is, if they give already CSV file and some data to play with, uh, build a basic collab notebook, try to see what they are trying to achieve, and build a framework for that and do the first part yourself. It could be either pre-processing, or if it's about GPT prompts, building some prompts and showing some output, etc. So do a good 20% of the work upfront and then apply for it. Now, here's a big problem. Most people say that if I do the work upfront and I don't get the job, then it's a waste of my time. I think that is partly true, but the way I look at it is, always, if someone is willing to pay money for a job and they posted it on there, then what happens is that it's a good soft validation for you that this problem exists and it's persistent across many companies as well, right? So even if you're not hired for the job, what you can do is you can repurpose that into a blog post or YouTube video. And the second thing is, just the learning from it will help you to apply for similar jobs, because you can use the same pre-processing or commands and prompts, etc. for GPT-3, which you can later use for other jobs as well. But the biggest thing is that from a client's perspective, if you do a good chunk of the job and kind of show these are the steps needed, then it's believable for them that they really understand the problem statement and you can deliver. I think that helped for me quite a bit as well. And the other very important point that I would say is actually explore communities. For example, if you're talking about ML, AI, and all these startups and other companies, what happens is that they have their own personal Slack channels. It could be even search engines. For example, if you just take search engines, then Haystack, Gina.ai, and VV8, Pinecone, most of them have their own Slack channels. And usually those Slack channels are not too big, usually in the order of hundreds or 200 people or 300 people, some of the emerging startups and open source communities. And what you can do is, while learning about, for example, semantic search, you could go and contribute there in the Slack channels, answering people's questions and things like that. And I do know quite a few people who got freelancing gigs from there, because instead of being very generic on, let's say, LinkedIn and talking about semantic search and Twitter and doing that, if you go and do within a community, small knit community, and contribute to their whoever is asking any questions, etc., then there is high chance of conversions. So tap onto these high knit communities. Those are the great source for establishing trust as well as getting high quality work. And main thing is to pick communities before they become big, or pick open source projects or startups before they actually become big, once you have some level of expertise in it. Because if you establish trust from very early on, then you are at a higher leverage to take up those freelancing gigs as well as other opportunities that come along. So that's one main thing. And so that's the part about filtering the, getting the first freelancing gig. So just to summarize, you could apply on Upwork or any of these things, but try to do a good chunk of work beforehand and be more proactive than the average application. And the second thing is, whatever you are good at, try to showcase about that in LinkedIn as well as Twitter, and write threads and other things. And blogging is one persistent medium, because a blog could be discovered even 2 years later or 3 years later. So always have a persistent medium as well, instead of just using it for day-to-day like social media. That's one thing. And I would say honestly, first client or first gig is the toughest. It is always the case. But once you get that and do that very well, usually clients come back again, or they recommend others as well. So that's very important. And the other thing I get, the doubts that I get most often is, how do you filter the right clients? So more than the job, it's also equally important to actually take the work from the right clients. Because if the client, it's just like working with a manager. If the manager is not good, and no matter how well you do, you are not rewarded well, or you are not treated well, right? So it's very important on that front. And for me, the usual background checks that I do is try to get some social presence of whoever is reaching out. If it's a B2B client, then usually I try to see if their company has raised some funding, or if it's established enough for me to trust on them. So that's one main thing. Whoever is reaching out and talking to you, do some kind of soft background check on them. And the biggest problem most freelancers get is actually not getting paid even after the work is done. I think that's a really big problem. So the first step is actually taking only trustworthy work from social channels or through established companies, others. And the second thing is actually using escrow services like Upwork. For people who do not know much about escrow, basically, if you and I agree on, let's say, $500 job, I already pay the $500 to Upwork, and it's already out of my bank account or credit card. And your work starts, and only if your work is delivered, then that $500 gets credited into your bank account. So usually this eliminates the problem that the client is ignoring you after the work is done, or you get ghosted once the work is done, and all these things can be avoided because of this. And the other thing is that try to gauge what the client is aiming for, because if they constantly have changing priorities, guidelines, then agreeing on a fixed rate project is going to just cost you time, effort, and your mental peace. So it is extremely crucial to agree on things that you will do as part of the fixed rate project, and any changes as they come, discuss them accordingly on if you need to reprioritize them and price them differently, etc. And also read terms and conditions of the offer. Usually client gives some kind of basic contract But if it's too strict that you cannot work with any other client for the next 2 years in the same space and other such strict contracts, it's usually a bad sign. Most people do not read through the contracts and just sign with blindly. But I think it's important to read the contracts and see what you are getting into. It's very important. And the biggest thing I always advise people is don't freelance full time, because once you start freelancing full time, it's almost like working for a company. So once you freelance full time, they think that they own your time completely. So anything that you do kind of gets monitored even deeper, and any other tasks that you take, any other freelancing or small time gigs, etc., that you take can also be monitored, because once you are a full-time freelancer, it's almost like they treat you almost like full-time employee, even if it's not there yet in terms of perks and other things. So always my guideline is do not exceed freelancing more than 20 hours a week. That is part-time. That's what I usually do. That gives me leverage to work on other things, side hustles, etc. And the other thing is how to charge. So depending on where you are located as well as client, etc., try to understand these things, that there's an hourly rate for everybody, in the sense that usually if you're doing hard work, which is lifting, I mean, the hard labor work could be at a minimum of $15 or $13, depending on where you live, etc. Right? So always compare yourself with non-technical labor where it is at minimum, and then try to price yourself definitely higher than that, depending on where you're located as well as where the client is from, and balancing that. And the other thing that most freelancers do, established freelancers do, is take 50% before the start of the job itself, and then take the rest of the 50% of the amount once the milestones are achieved. That means the job is delivered. So just to establish that bridge that the client can pay, already 50% of the money will be dispersed. I mean, a good number of established freelancers do that. The only thing is that it is hard to get this from enterprises, because usually going through their payroll system and everything is complex. So approvals and other things are complex. Unless it's if it's an established company, enterprise, then you can ignore this. Usually I trust that they are an established company, and if someone is reaching out with their official email and all these things, then it can be ignored, that you need to take some money upfront and you can deliver the project and get the money from them later. And like I mentioned, do not do fixed price for constantly changing projects. If they are not clear about what you want them to deliver, then do not charge a fixed price. And for large scale projects, you also encounter this thing that, hey, what if we encounter some bugs probably 6 months down the line or something like that? So usually I would say how I do is, you agree for a job and you get the job done, then you give some runway, for example, a month or so, to fix bugs. So if there are any bugs in what you have developed, you can give them an opportunity for a 1-month window to get them fixed. But beyond that, if they need, let's say, annual support or semi-annual support, you can charge a percentage of the cost. It could be 10% or even up to 25% of the cost. If they need annual maintenance from you, or if they want your availability anytime to fix bugs or even develop few features, then you have that annual maintenance part. And any new feature additions are extra. Usually you talk with them to see what price is good for those features, and then you charge based on that. And next thing is payment. So usually if you are an individual freelancer, I would say you can create payment pages with any of these and even other tools, other payment gateways. So Stripe, PayPal, Razorpay, Instamojo, any of these, you can create payment pages and you can send that link. And usually all the cards and UPI payments or credit cards, debit cards, everything is accepted. Uh, and the other thing is that for international payments, for example, for few of the things, usually if you're from India, you need to have your website as well as terms and conditions, privacy policy, as well as refund policy. So in your website, for example, mine is ramsey.ai. I added privacy policy, terms and conditions, refund policy, all of these things as well, because most of these players, if you're accepting international payments, they want these to be there as well. And before proceeding further, we'll quickly pause here and take any questions that the audience might have. Yeah. Please unmute yourself if you have any questions and feel free to ask. Or if you're comfortable, just ask in the chat as well. Okay, looks like we don't have any.
Hi Ramshi, good evening. Prakash here.
Hi, Kaushal. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to know more about how can I keep eye on small startups or things like you said, open source community which are coming in. How do you keep an eye on this kind of things, like which is going to be hit? Like, yeah, this open source API looks like it is going to be a hit.
Hmm.
How could
Okay.
have I identified Gina or
Hmm.
Deepset when they were in there, when
Okay.
there were just 10 people in them? Yeah.
Got it. Got it. So I usually suggest two options. One is that uh, there are a few reports that are published every year about the rising GitHub stars. So companies that are in the rising trend. So they just talk about delta. That means if you had 1,000 GitHub stars last year and now you have 10,000, so it's rising fast. So usually, most of the companies, at least the tech companies, have GitHub accounts, and the GitHub stars and their increase is one way to monitor those. So that's one part. And how you do that, you don't need to do that manually. You can see what are the open source libraries that are trending, and there are Runway ML or few other companies, they release these stats as well for every quarter. Quarter one, these companies are the rising ones. Quarter two, these are the rising ones, etc. And the second, and I think the most useful one, is actually follow these accelerators, startup accelerators. For example, Y Combinator, Entrepreneur First, Techstars, all of these have companies, all of these have their websites. When you go to their websites, there is something called as portfolio. And in the portfolio, you can filter by, let's say, this quarter, or let's say 2021 last quarter, things like that. So basically, Y Combinator has two batches, winter and summer, etc. Right? So you can filter the most recent ones, find all the companies there, and just reach out to their CEOs or CTOs and go see their job boards. But usually, what happens is that if you see a good ML or AI company in the startup accelerator that just graduated from there, usually they are looking to raise money, and usually some of them have raised money, but they have not announced. Because if you see the actual funding cycle, how it happens is that I actually raise the money. Now, before the press announcement comes, it's almost 2 months. And only once the press announcement comes, then the world knows about the company and that they raised, etc. But the easiest way to be ahead of time is actually follow the startup accelerators and their websites and the currently graduating cohorts, and find companies that you can reach out to and talk to them. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Ramsey. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions before we proceed?
Hello, Ramsey. Mudit here.
Hi, Mudit, please go ahead. Yeah.
Ramsey, as you said, to follow a niche market. Suppose
Yeah.
we follow a edtech industry. Now
Hmm.
you developed a product for an startup or a company. A
Yeah.
similar kind of product or similar thing is needed by another company. So is there any, let's say, right issue? Is there like code will not be same, but algorithm or suppose the pseudocode is same. So how
Got
to
it.
tackle that? Matlab, to not fall into any legal terms.
Got it. Got it. Good point. Actually, I think that happens quite a lot with freelancers because they shift from project to project. So as I mentioned, you need to go through the freelancer agreement to see if they have any clause. What happens is that some companies have 6-month non-compete clause. That means you should not work with any other company in edtech and build a recommendation system for them in the next 6 months, etc. What I usually say is that it's if they're paying you really well, then that's okay. But other than that, if anyone has such clauses, I usually negotiate with them that, hey, I work with multiple tech companies. I've already worked with so and so. So this is a very hard clause for me to accept on, because I need to, if I find another freelancing gig to build recommendation engine, I would definitely go ahead and take that. So I tell them that if you really want, then you can uh, probably 1.5x the price or things like that, or pay me higher so that I can keep that bandwidth and other. But other than that, if you're put on really hard clauses, negotiate with them, and I would mostly say do not accept such critical ones. And when it comes to the actual implementation part, so the code that you have written for some company, that cannot be directly used with other company, but the intellectual property, that is your algorithm and high level stuff, the pseudocode part, I don't think they can, unless you have these extremely competing clauses, the rest of the things, they cannot stop you on even implementing recommendation engine on other companies and other things, etc. That's one thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions before we proceed? Okay, cool. Looks like there aren't any. So we'll proceed and we'll take questions again at the end of the session. So the other thing is, how do you raise prices? So I always tell to people that freelancing, definitely you should charge higher than a normal full-time employee, because first of all, you're not paid for any perks like health insurance, food allowance, or any other things, gym allowance and all these things at all, like regular employment. So you are definitely on the lower side of the costs, etc. on that front. So definitely do not charge on the level with any full-time developer, rather charge 1.5x times, etc. And if anyone hard questions you why you're charging so much, justify these things, that as a freelancer or consultant, you need to take care of all the insurance and other costs, infrastructure costs. You don't get laptop and other things, etc. Right? So all these things are factored in, need to be factored in. And I think if you're a long-term freelancer for like 6 months or 1 year, I always say charge premium or even ask for some kind of equity, because if you're a full-time employee in a company, usually 1 year mark, you get some equity vested for you, and from there it continues on, right? So anything that you are doing for 1 year, almost like full-time or close to full-time with the company, even if it is freelancing, it is delivering enough value to the company that you kind of deserve equity in the real world, if you talk about it. So once you hit that 1 year mark, either ask for some level of equity if they allow it, or raise your prices by a good 25% or something like that, by justifying that if there was a regular full-time employee delivering so much value, they would have vested their equity or shares, ESOPs, etc. in the first year window. The thing is that the more you are aware of how things operate, the better you can negotiate. That's why I'm telling you these things. And the other best way is simply, once you're doing some freelancing and you get another freelancing opportunity, do not take it at the same rate, usually raise prices. And I always say that, hey, currently I'm freelancing at, let's say, $50 an hour or $100 an hour. So currently I'm freelancing at $100 an hour. So if I have to take your job up as well, it should at least justify that cost. Otherwise, it's not worth my time. That's what I say. And I'll tell you the secret here. If you have a job, they'll ask your pay slips, your previous salary, all these things. If you're freelancing, they'll never ask. Usually no one asks, can you show me that you are getting paid at $100? Can you get me that letter? All these things they do not ask. And even if they ask, say that, I don't think I need to justify that. I mean, you are the one who approached me or something like that. Even if you approach them, you can tell them that this is what I've been doing, and you can look at the quality of my work either on blogs or other things and just divert them there. The main thing is that you can raise prices. Not like employment, which is 10% raise or 5% raise that your manager gives. You can raise at 2x, 3x price. For the short answer, whatever I freelanced at last year at this point of time, now I'm at 3x that cost, 3x that hourly rate. The only reason is that I have that leverage. And I'll tell you one main thing, which is even in jobs, the only way to get once you get an offer, the only way to bump up that offer is leverage. And leverage comes in two ways. One, you have competing offers. That means you got 2 or 3 simultaneous job offers and someone is willing to pay 150K. So you can bid the current one by saying that I already have a 150K job offer. And the second thing is actually the willingness to let it go. So if you are not very hard and you are okay to let it go if it doesn't meet a certain criteria, then basically you have the leverage. So always try to have that kind of leverage, either with some runway, financial runway that you have, or with side income sources. It could be from ebooks or courses or even a micro SaaS or startup, something like that. Then you can easily say that this is not my priority if it's not in the range. Otherwise, if you're just doing freelancing full time, then everyone thinks that that's the best you can do, so you will accept at that rate. But if you do multiple things and freelancing is only one of them, then you have higher leverage. So that's one. And before we forget, I wanted to tell you this thing, that as a freelancer, if you do not if you're not full-time on any company, of course you do not have health insurance and term insurance. So if you have a family, and even if you're an individual, health insurance is must. So get a health insurance for you, and if you have old parents, definitely for family. And the other thing is, if your spouse works, then leverage that health insurance. Then in those cases, you don't need to have your personal health insurance. You can tag along on the spouse's health insurance policy. And usually, a fact is that personal health insurance is not as, I would say, as high leverage as a corporate insurance. So if you are on spouse's health insurance, it's much better than having a personal health insurance policy. And simply the second thing is term insurance. So for those who are unaware, just that something happens, an adverse event like death or something like that, you get a lump sum, like maybe 150K or $200K your family gets that lump sum. And as if you're on the high end of freelancing, definitely have that, because the world shouldn't end. uh, most people overlook this, so but I wanted to tell you that do not ignore this as well. And few pro tips from my freelancing journey. The biggest thing is that do not start multiple freelancing jobs at the same time or within even 1 week's time, because no matter any freelancing job that you take, there is always uh, time that you need to take to adjust with the client as well as the business, their workflow, their tools, and all these things. So I always try to keep at least like 2 weeks to 1 month gap between freelancing jobs. So do not make that mistake of taking up multiple. And the second thing is, I always say, if you're not confident about something, don't lower your prices. Usually the human psychology is that if you're not confident at something, you tell a lower price so that people will be more, willing to take or take a bet on you, etc. But I always say, instead buy more time and upskill yourself, take a course, or finish off some blog series or something like that, just by saying that currently you're occupied and you can take up the job next month or something like that. Buy more time. Basically, don't lower your prices if you're not confident, but buy more time. And the other thing is, don't really take tasks that are well beyond your comfort zone. They should stretch you. They should push you out of your comfort zone a little bit, but at the same time, it should be in your skill set to execute them if you learn other things, etc., during the freelancing time. So only to take such tasks. And build processes for repetitive tasks. That means if some client is asking for you to do X, and that X thing happens across multiple clients, always build processes and document them, and maybe have like a starter code or some pre-processing module built for you, or some post-processing module that you have built, custom post-processing or custom pre-processing that you have built, that you plug in for every task that falls in the similar zone. So for repetitive tasks, build some processes. It could be modules or some documentation, etc. And from time to time, turn your insights from freelancing, because no matter what people say, being in the real job is actual learning, because you will encounter things that are not obvious in theoretical learning. So always there are things to learn, or you get newer findings when you're on the job, on the run. That's why you always get newer insights that are not obvious to people who are not working in the domain or not working on that exact problem. Turn insights into blog posts. That's what I recommend. And about upskilling, as a freelancer, you have to constantly upskill yourself, because if you're in a job, you are basically on task-based mode. So what you are assigned to is more important, and you need not really get upskilled on the technology that you're working on. But when it comes to freelancing, there's bigger need to do that. And the other thing is, maintain a good network of freelancers. Usually, for example, if I am busy and I get a task, perhaps not in my budget range of what they can pay for me, etc., the simple thing is that I divert them to some communities. For example, Max Pool is one community where Pratik, a friend of mine, operates that. So for for clients who reach out to me, I divert them there. And the other thing is that I'm slowly growing my cohort-based course community and the course takers from there, right? So the first thing that I mentioned is that, hey, I have like 20 graduates so far, then I can post in there because they are NLP graduates that I have taught. Maybe you can find a relevant one there. So always be part of that network of freelancers, because opportunities always get passed around each other. If someone is occupied, they can bounce off to other etc. And I already mentioned, which is use side projects, digital products, that is ebooks, courses, etc. Basically improve the passive income source as well. For example, if you're in countries like US, etc., then Medium blogging is also, you can get paid for Medium blogs, blog posts, etc. monthly. So always increase the passive income source as well. And as I mentioned, get to a point of leverage. It could be having a financial runway or building a personal brand that you can scale massively in terms of how much you freelance for, etc. And I think the biggest and the often overlooked thing is that you should just be technical and improve your technical skill set. But I'll tell you honestly that a lot of freelancers can double their income by improving on their soft skills, not spending another 1,000 hours in the same technology, because they matter a lot. Because every single communication, how you craft an email, or if a freelancer asks for a requirement, how you respond back, every single thing matters. And your professionalism, a part of your reward and your payment is actually your professionalism in dealing with the client, and only the other half is technical, the technical side of things. So remember to improve your soft skills as well. That means improving your speaking, verbal, writing skills, copywriting skills, or all these technical presentation skills, Canva skills as well. All these things matter. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is productize repetitive services. Like I mentioned, let's say if you built your custom pre-processing module because you have worked with 10 clients in the financial domain, and you know that they all need this fixed pre-processing module for text, simply productize that. What do I mean by that? At least release it as a GitHub library and let it get some stars and build your brand, etc. The pre-processing module for financial services, or pre-processing for medtech, or things like that, or semantic search, intent classification. It could be anything like this. And one level beyond is actually making money with those products. So if you can build some kind of SaaS out of it, go ahead and do that as well. Because the main thing is, even as a freelancer, I'll tell you the biggest thing is that the best way to be a freelancer is not to act like a freelancer, but be open to that, in the sense that if you are very eager to get freelancing jobs, then you lose that negotiation power and all these things. But if you have these products, SaaS and other things, first of all, you set yourself up for infinite growth and you build leverage. So where do you release these things? So I mean, if you're big on Twitter, then Gumroad is very popular for you to, release ebooks, courses, and other things. Udemy has a massive audience, but if you want to really build your brand, then go on Teachable and host courses on your personal websites. And from time to time, try to do paid master classes. It could be you hosting your own master classes, or reach out to some businesses where they might need training or something. Maybe they need a weekend training on NLP or things like that. Then you do paid master classes for them. For example, an accelerator, a startup accelerator based out of Malaysia, wanted like an introduction to AI for non-technical people, and I did like a weekend masterclass for 4 or 5 hours. So things like that, opportunities like that, sometimes they come to you, and sometimes you need to be proactive in reaching out. And like I mentioned, build a brand for high leverage, because there are so many times after doing some freelancing gigs, if I do it extremely well, sometimes clients pay 2x the amount, and sometimes they ask me to be a co-founder as well, but maybe the time and the stage and all these things might not be appropriate for us to jump in. But do high quality work. And I know a friend of mine who was working on TopTal as a freelancer, and he worked with the client for 6 months, And he was so impressed that the client, although he was like a 1 million ARR company, he kept as a head of the tech. And now my friend has a development team of around 30 to 40 people, and he heads that and gets a strong revenue cut. It's almost like he is a freelancer turned entrepreneur with a significant revenue without the stress of starting something on your own. So you have all these opportunities as well if you're a good freelancer. um, like I mentioned, freelancing caps at an hourly rate, but products and services, other services don't, like building a SaaS and other things. And okay, the other thing is that once you hit high revenue, register business. I mean, even from the beginning, you can operate with a business email. I mean, just for example, mine is question.ai. Up until very recently, it's not registered, but I can have my email ramsri@question.ai, and that's the freelancing email that I use. And why do you need to register business? Basically, B2B clients see dealing with businesses in a positive light than dealing with an individual, because a registered business has some, incorporation and other things. Because of that, they can technically sue you. I don't think you need to get into that position of getting sued, but B2B clients usually feel more comfortable. And the other thing is that once you register a business, there's that corporate cost of 20% corporate tax or other things, etc. So what you make as a freelancer will go down, because now you need to operate, file taxes, and do other things as a business. But at the same time, once you're beyond a certain revenue point, uh, you will get in more inbound clients and B2B clients because of that same reason that you have registered business. So ideally, that should be offset. And the other thing is that you can hire more freelancers under your business. And for example, if you're two people, then you can actually distribute equity and build a brand. And that brand could have a value, be sold as well, right? So you're kind of segueing from an individual freelancer to a startup or corporation, something like that. You don't need to go there, but I'm just giving you some paths for you to explore. And the other thing is that if you're registering a business, for example, registering an international business, I mean, in US, like a Delaware C Corp in US is helpful in some cases, because if you're raising VC funds, or even if you're charging international clients, if you're a Delaware registered C Corp and charging a client like 100K in a US client, they are much more comfortable with all the transaction and everything dealing with than doing a business with outside another country and other things, right? So keep these things in mind as well. Do not ignore them. But I won't suggest that you go to registering a business and all these things until you hit a good revenue mark. And we have come to the end of the session. Just 15 seconds. We'll get to Q&A. So basically, I'm doing a 4-week practical intro to NLP quad-based course that starts this Saturday, February 5th. If anyone is interested, they can go to ramsri.ai/NLP and check out the course, curriculum, and other things. If you have any questions, you can drop me an email at ramsri@question.ai. Now I'm done. Happy to take all your questions. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
Hi, Ramsey.
Hi. Yeah.
Yeah, this is me, Muhammad Aslam. Yeah. I told I will connect regarding text to paint application. Probably I got caught up with work, office work. So most probably this week,
Sure.
weekend, I'll mail you. Hope
Sure.
we'll catch up there. Okay.
Sounds good.
Coming to this, thanks for this master class. Sorry, I was a bit late to the party, so I couldn't, focus. I actually joined 15 20 minutes back, so
Sure.
please share the slides. And one more thing,
Hmm.
say I'm working full time,
Hmm. Hmm.
so So one of the leads I got is from UK and Saudi Arabia.
Hmm.
They're the students. They want to visualize the data. They want to do some assignments. Say
Hmm.
any other platform where I can get some leads, and some other platform where I can promote my gigs. So if you can
Hmm.
name a few, that would be
Hmm.
of a great help.
Okay. So the platforms as such, I mean, there's Upwork, TopTal, Freelancer.com, and Fiverr for like small time gigs, etc. All these things. So the thing is that uh, I always say pick one or two platforms and invest your time in that, because you need to build your portfolio, because even just getting on the platform, integrating your payments, and just filling all the necessary things and getting approval. And if they have any like programming test, etc., all these things, that itself is quite a lot, right? So I always say pick one or two platforms. For example, if you are aiming for like high net worth things, probably Upwork and TopTal or something that you can start with, and build a profile there, and you can continue from there. And the other thing is that you need to also build reputation in those platforms, because most of the jobs, they see what's the prior work done on that platform, as well as the finishing rate and other star ratings, etc. So pick one or two platforms, build your portfolio as well as your project things on those platforms. Yeah.
And one more thing, I can promote my gigs as well.
Yes, you can promote, you can create gigs, and you can create a particular portfolio for different kinds of jobs as well and promote them. Now, when it comes to your employer part, I think it's just employers and yours agreement. So I think it depends from person to person. So apart from that, you can promote your own gigs, what you're good at. You can even add your project. For example, the text to painting that you're talking about, you can create that
Yeah,
as
and
well.
code to code.
Yeah, code to code.
And code to code as well. And yeah,
Yes.
and one last question is,
Hmm.
I can, okay, this is the last question. I can do, okay, say I got one order. I can take that order and get it done from some other freelancing website, and I can circle it.
Mm, I mean, usually I don't recommend it, because it's a lot to do with your reputation and other things. So uh, you can hire some interns to get some submodules done. In a way, you are giving more employment. I think that's decent enough. But another platform and others, so I wouldn't personally go that route.
Yeah. Thanks for the
Yeah,
recommendation. Thank you so much.
sure. Okay.
Hey Ramji, thanks. Deepak here. Thanks for
Yeah,
the wonderful masterclass.
please go ahead.
My question is,
Yeah.
yeah, when you are starting freelancing, right? So even let's say there is no conflict of interest, do you have to inform your company that you are working with right now?
Hmm. The answer is yes. So, I mean, companies hold quite a lot of power. Simply put, they can technically sue you if they want, uh, and do any of those stuff. So you need to make sure that you get some approval from your manager or others. So I always say that unless you have like a written approval from the manager or the company, in other cases, until you're caught, you're okay. But if you're caught, then you come under all those things, right? Where you should not use the same, whatever you learned in the company, you should not apply it to get monetized from other companies, or provide your services to competitors at the same time. So you fall under all these clauses usually. Yeah.
No, like so, it may happen that if there is no conflict of interest, even then we have to inform.
So your voice is actually breaking. If you don't mind, can you type it in the chat? Yeah.
Sure.
Pratik says codementor.io is also a good one. Great. Awesome. How consulting is different from freelancing? I mean, I don't know the technical difference, but it's a more polished term that I use. Beyond that, mostly consulting, I would say it refers to you are working with other companies, B2B companies. I mean, if you tell you are a consultant, that could even mean that you are working JP Morgan or any other company, and your title is actually consultant. So you are full time for JP Morgan, but your title is consultant as well. Okay, what if there is no conflict? If there is no conflict, I don't think there is any problem on either side. So you can definitely go ahead and do that as long as your company has no conflict with that. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Please go ahead, Kalyan. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Ram. That was very interesting session, and I especially grabbed a lot of interesting stuff on freelancing stuff.
Awesome.
So I have two questions. Those are particularly on the subject side. Okay. So what are the upcoming trends in the AI field, and what do you think in which field we can focus so that we can know better, we can be successful in a career, as well as we can do much freelancing or interesting projects on industry as well.
Got it. So broadly speaking, I would say two things in NLP. I mean, in NLP, if you're talking, then text generation. So all these large scale models like GPT-3, etc. For example, if you had GPT-3 access 1 year ago, just by having access, you could have made $60 per hour or $70 per hour on Upwork, because people with GPT-3 access were so less that if you just grabbed onto that opportunity, you would have made like 10K or 20K USD in the 3-4 months or 6 months timeline. So text generation is one. And the second biggest thing that I would bet on is actually semantic search, because of the new vector search engines as well as vector search databases. There's quite a lot of activity that is going on there. So getting good at semantic search and building modern search systems, integrating semantic search will be one. And ML ops is another. I think it's been growing and it still is, where deploying something scalably and both on effective deployment of models as well as scalable deployment of models. All these things are also still relevant and important. Then there are some trends that you could really bet on in the long term, but I would be with caution, something like, let's say, graph neural networks and other things. The thing is that they are upcoming. Maybe you will not have freelancing gigs as of today. I would rather focus on what's currently being paid for and get skilled in that so that I can leverage on top of that. And there's an easy way, which is actually go on to, for example, upwork.com and just type natural language processing. Just go through the top post, filter by, let's say, minimum of $1,000, etc. Then you will see high-end gigs. And you can easily get a snapshot of what people want you to build, what libraries they want you to use, things like that. It's a hack that I do, and it works fairly well. Even if I want to sometimes get inspiration for some blog posts, I do that as well. Yeah.
I mean, what was the website? Can you name, please?
So I use Upwork. I think there might be better ones as well, which I am not. I haven't fully explored. Upwork is one. Yeah.
Okay, got it. I mean, my second question was almost like the similar point which I already touched up. Like, what are the currently underrated fields in the AI industry? Like, which we can. So maybe is it a good to invest time in upskilling in those areas so that we can have do something big in the future?
Okay. So, I mean, broadly, I would say multimodal learning is picking because now the transformers have been able to, you know, uh, bring about quite a lot of change in both NLP, speech, as well as computer vision, like multimodal learning, where you combine both images and text into the same vector space, or do search with text and images combined. For example, if you're building an e-commerce search engine, when there was no single unique model that could encode text and images into the same vector space, then your recommendation engine that you would build was kind of like independent, where you could combine them with some kind of weight parameters, etc. But when you have multimodal models that can embed both into same vectors, you could build recommendation engines and other things combining both text and its corresponding image. If it's an e-commerce thing, then fashion clothing as well as the description, you can combine them and put them into the same vector space and do recommendation engines, search engines, things like that, right? So that's one. And the other thing is that, honestly speaking, I don't follow trends too actively because trends come quite often and it's hard to keep up with them. I more focus on, if a trend sustain for like 6 months, I want to leverage that and build a product out of it. I think that's a much safer bet for me than betting on trends that are really upcoming. That's how I look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, got it, Ram. Thank you. I mean, I look forward to it in many more sessions in the future.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
Hey Ramsey, Deepak here.
Hi, Deepak. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so as you mentioned about the taxes, right? So are there any, how it's different than a normal salarized taxes implication?
Okay. So, especially in India, okay, there are two parts to it. One is a lot of freelancer income that you earn, a lot of it can also go into infrastructure. That means you take a freelancing gig of, let's say, $5,000 or something like that. You can also show a part of it as you bought cloud infrastructure, you had to host or take GPUs to train and other things, etc. Of course, those that much detail is not given in what you tell, what you write up, but mostly tax consultant will take care of showing those expenses. First of all, a part of it could be showed as, infrastructure things. So you get only billed on whatever is remaining from the infrastructure part. And second thing is, if you're operating in India, there's a little bit of trouble because once you go beyond like the 20 lakhs point, you need to register GST and pay GST and all those things. So instead, I would advise, once you go beyond the 20 lakhs point, register a business like a company or something like that. So if you're making 30 lakhs from a job, you only need to file taxes yearly. But if you earn 30 lakhs as a freelancer, you need to be filing GST every month. Of course, it might not cost much, but there's extra overhead, right? So that's one. And there are a few ways to actually, I won't say circumvent, but ideal ways to operate. One way is to register an overseas company. For example, even if you make 100K a year, don't draw that money. Let that money be in the company. Probably that year you take 20 lakhs. Next year you take 20 lakhs or 15 lakhs. If let's say if your spouse or someone is working and they are making good money, you don't need more than 20 lakhs this year, right? You can only draw 10 lakhs and perhaps do the same thing next year. Or you can hire somebody else from that 100K with 50K and distribute the salaries and all these things, right? So there are all these options as well, and none of these are illegal. What I'm telling is completely legal. It's just the way how you want to operate, distribute load and other things. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, got it. So let's say someone is like a full-time job also, and at side by side they are doing freelancing. So do they need to have this advanced tax payment also then?
Hmm. That part I'm not clear. If you have a full-time job as well as do some freelancing, so I don't know how it works. I would say ideal to check with tax consultant. I don't want to.
Okay, okay, yeah, sure, sure. Okay, yeah, thanks, Ramsri, for this section.
Sure, awesome. Any other questions? Anything in the chat as well? If you don't want to ask in the mic.
Yeah, hi Ramsey. How to get the initial gigs? Like say, how I registered on Fiverr Upwork. So what are the strategies to get the initial gigs? Because say, first customer is that is the first what we derives. So if we keep on waiting, if we don't get the gigs, then we'll lose the interest. Then we can
Yes.
focus on our regular.
Agreed. So I think I covered this a little bit in depth before you joined, but I'll summarize it for you, which is, first of all, in whichever platform you are on, uh, do a quarter 20% or 25% of the work beforehand, because sometimes you see that in Upwork or even on other sites, Freelancer or even Fiverr, etc., people give descriptive things, and even sometimes they give a small CSV file of how they want the input and output to be, what model needs to be built, etc. So instead of just saying that, hey, I can do your job, let's get on a call, or I can do your job, please do hire me, etc. Instead, understand the requirements. Probably if you need to build some GPT-3 prompt or build a collab notebook for some visualization, some pre-processing, etc., do that beforehand and send that in the application itself, so that the client understands that you have done your work and you understand the problem statement and you can deliver it. Because when you're in the early stages where you don't have a profile and previous gigs, it's very important to build extra trust for them, for the client, to make it easier. That's the main thing. And the other thing that I told was, even if that doesn't succeed and you don't get the job, you can repurpose that into a blog post or YouTube video from the learnings that you got. That's what I said. Yeah.
And one more thing, there is a place called in Fiverr where say if I post the requirement, the freelancers will come and they will give the comments, and how I can access it from other side.
Can you repeat your question? Sorry.
Say I'm using Fiverr to get my things done. There is one posting service where I will post my requirements. Freelancers will comment their quotations and some comments. How I can visit that from other side?
From other side, in the sense, do you want to directly connect the freelancer outside of
No, no,
Fiverr?
no, 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 no. What I meant to say is, say I'm offering service. I
Hmm.
want to see the page where new business clients come and push their service.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I don't think I know that part, so probably not the best question for me to answer. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Sure, absolutely. Um, any other questions? Anything in the chat as well? Okay. How can a fresher skilled in NLP get a full-time remote paying jobs outside of India? It's hard to get shortlisted for interview online or also. Anyway, we can try to get in any suggestions you can. Okay. So Sanjit, I think the best way is actually get onto the Slack channels, or the other way is actually, for example, if you want to get into Hugging Face or Gradio or even Streamlit or anything like that, is basically write like 4 or 5 blogs about Streamlit, 4 or 5 blogs about Hugging Face, or make some 5 or 6 blogs about YouTube, on YouTube, make videos on them, etc. Build a portfolio for them, and then reach out to their let's say what community manager role, etc., and then slowly get in from there. That's one part. Basically, you need to do quite a lot of work on your end, because it is hard from here to get full-time remote jobs. That's definitely there. Second thing is actually be in the Slack channels. So be in the Slack channels of Gina.ai, Hugging Face, or VV8, or any of these things, and get your name known for the founders or the main members of there. Actively contribute there, and after like 1 or 2 months, then apply for that. Because simply I know for Hugging Face, I know a developer who was just contributing for free for some time. Now he has a full-time job with Hugging Face, and I think very good salary along with perks and other things on par with everything else. The only way was basically in the discussion forums and all these things he was active. But I definitely feel your question, because it is extremely hard in the early stages to actually get an AI job and actually get like a good paying job, remote one as well. So I won't sugarcoat it that it is easy, but I'm just throwing some paths if you want to go and explore. Yeah.